into a brand new wave, drowning out the noise that's tame. Liberty whispers through the brave, breaking free from every chain. Nullify the rules they crave, crypto beats that pave the way. Anarchy with minds that's safe, algorithms new dawn today. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride. Beyond control we take a stand, casting off the iron brand. Freedom flowing through our hands, revolution's our command. Decentralize the way we plan, all together we expand. Breaking shackles for the clan, in this journey we're unpanned. Out of bounds and out of sight, building futures pure and bright. Escape the grip and win the fight. Welcome into the legacy ride.
Hey guys, what's going on? It's a live edition of Crypto Wednesday. We're going to go ahead and talk about Bob Murphy and at the Bitcoin Texas conference in 2015. So go ahead, let's go ahead and jump on in.
For you, O Lord, are most high over all the earth. I am the legacy of Jennifer Kaiser. This is Crypto Wednesday, episode 3, standalone edition. We are actually live. So for those already tuning in, this is probably weird for you. Why are you smiling, Cheesy?
Well, because I'm praying that you come back and I wouldn't have to do the podcast by myself, and here you are, and we're live.
Wait, if you want to do it by yourself.
All right, here we go. I'm just kidding.
No, not yet. Oh, news. News, something that's very newsworthy right now. First off, I guess privacy is a crime. So is free speech. He was found not guilty of the other 2 counts, but
Roman Storm
is probably looking at least 5 years in prison for open source code. Basically, they have remanded him. They've remanded him, I believe. Accordingly, they have remanded him until sentencing, but which is a little. I don't understand that. You remand somebody that's, a violent offender, but hey, we live in America.
I thought we lived in a society.
America, society, Bolshevikism, whatever.
Imagine that. You leave Russia for the land of the free, and you're a slave too.
Oh yeah, land of the free. Oh no, the Bolsheviks were. They got their name, obviously. They got their name in the early 20th century, but the Bolsheviks have always been around. Some could argue that Bolshevikism began here in the States long, long ago. Some could also say that Constitution is Bolshevikism.
It's certainly
Eerily,
a social contract of socialism.
eerily similar to a lot of socialist, totalitarian nations in the world.
I mean, even North Korea has a constitutional right?
Yeah. Your privacy doesn't matter. Your speech doesn't matter. You have no rights, everybody.
The only real right
Negatively.
you have is the right to leave in the moment and go for greener pastures.
Now, your only right is to exist as a steward on this planet and to what you just said, to divorce from a society or culture that you don't mesh with. Get right with Christ, because that's the only thing that's the only person that's ever God, person, deity, entity, essence. The only essence that's going to save you. Live your life, live in love. This is getting negative at this point. The positive is live in love. And with that, what better yet than to love your neighbor as you would love yourself by advocating for greener pastures in divorcing from said system.
Yeah.
With cryptocurrency.
That's what Bob Murphy, the Bob Murphy Show, is going to be talking about. This isn't from his Bob. It's just, like I said, a Texas Bitcoin conference that he headlined. And I thought it was kind of interesting. We could check it out. So, are you ready? Hey.
Hold on.
All right, let's go.
Nope, no, I went up.
Okay, so to do that,
off with his fucking head.
You're okay. All right, let's go.
Okay, am I on? You guys hear me? Oh, yeah, now I'm bionic. Great. It's always good to be at a conference like this and reassure myself that my Facebook friends actually exist in real life, so I'm glad to see many of you. And what I'm going to do, let me just explain the scope of my talk. So I am an economist coming from the tradition of what's called the Austrian School of Economics. And what I'm going to do, okay, very good. Can we get a clap for liberty? No. All right. Now I won the crowd over. Okay. What I want to talk about, as I was trying to figure out what could I give to this group that maybe another speaker wouldn't be giving you, because obviously there's a lot of people here who know more about the mechanics of Bitcoin than I do, and I'm coming at this as an economist who was a former college professor and so forth. So I think what I can do with this group is I want to make sure you understand why it is, because I'm sure many of you have noticed this, that there's a bit of a pushback from some in the Austro-libertarian community where you normally would probably expect that they would be huge proponents of Bitcoin and all currencies more generally, and yet there's this vehement hostility to it coming from certain quarters, and in particular citing what's called Ludwig von Mises' regression theorem. Okay, so my goal in this talk is to very quickly just distill down the elements of Austrian economics, and in particular its treatment of monetary theory, that you would need to know so that you at least understand where they're coming from, right? Because I think there's two things going on in terms of that hostility. One is just human nature, that you got 1,000 different things libertarians are trying to sort of beat back the state, and so if Bitcoin ends up working, or the things in this genre start working, and other people were naysaying at the beginning, well then they feel silly, and so that sort of reinforces this. There's nothing you can do about that. If it's just not the horse that they put their money on, they're always going to be bitter about it. But it's more than just that. There really is a reason, and you'll see it once I explain it to you, why it is that people coming out of the Austrian tradition of economics and the way Austrians explain monetary theory why Bitcoin just came out of left field. And it takes someone from that background a while to just get their head wrapped around what Bitcoin even is and how it could be possible. And so that's what I want you to see. So, especially because I know there's a lot of you in here who are sort of like Bitcoin evangelists, and I want you to understand so you can at least know how to approach these people and try to argue with them and see where they're coming from. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to need to explain 3 pieces, 2 things that Carl Menger contributed to economics, and then 1 thing that came from Mises. And then when I give you those 3 things, you'll be in a position to really, like I say, it'll be obvious to you why there's this hostility from certain quarters against Bitcoin. All right, so Carl Menger is the founder of what's called the Austrian School of Economics. In case you don't know that phrase, it's not that they study the GDP in Vienna. The reason it's called Austrian economics is just that historically, that's where these people happen to be from. It was actually a term of derision that the German historical school economists were just dismissing these guys in the 1870s and saying, oh, it's just Austrian economics, because Germany was the center there, and these guys in Austria it was just a backwater. So that's where the name came from, and it stuck. So Carl Menger in the early 1870s wrote a book that we now translate as The Principles of Economics, and that was the foundation of what we now call the Austrian school. So Carl Menger did all sorts of things. 2 things that we need to know for what I'm trying to get across tonight is his explanation for the origin of money, and then also what's called subjective value theory. All right, so the origin of money, and this is not just that Austrians go to Carl Menger. He actually crystallized the way professional economists in the late 1800s dealt with the origin of money. He actually wrote the encyclopedia entry for the relevant periodical on this topic. Okay, so he was the authority. It's not just that today's Austrians look back to him because he's their guy. Everyone thought he was the guy for this topic. So the first thing that Menger does is he explodes what might be called the state theory of money. So there was a prevailing view, just like we see today, where people kind of just assume that if something useful socially exists, it must have been consciously created by somebody or some group, and probably that they had political authority. And you see that that pattern today. Whenever there's an issue, the catchphrase, "Oh, there ought to be a law." Right? Or whenever there's some kind of social problem, a lot of people, the knee-jerk reaction is, well, the government ought to do X, Y, and Z to deal with that. Well, that also was true among professional economists in certain sects, that they thought, well, clearly money is useful, and so therefore some wise king or something in the past must have invented it. And so Menger just walked through and critiqued and said, well, no, that doesn't really make sense. For one thing, we don't have a record of that. Right? It's not that there was some guy, maybe called Eddie Money, who invented this thing, and then now that's his legacy. You would think, we have all kinds of things about Hammurabi, giving law and so forth, and things that these rulers did. You'd think the guy who invented money, we might remember him, and there is no such record. All right? So he's saying that's one strike against it. So the other thing is, if you hadn't grown up in a society using money, it's kind of a crazy idea. Right? Imagine if you grew up in a society where people were just bartering, and then somebody comes along and says, hey, instead of trading for stuff that you actually want, why don't you trade away your valuable stuff for something you really don't want to use at all? But as long as we can all agree to do that, then it'll be fine, because you'll get something else. Like, let's grab this shell. Nobody likes these shells for anything, but give me your cow for this shell, and don't worry, because whatever you actually want to get, that person will take the shell as well. Right? That sounds crazy, that idea, if you've never experienced money firsthand. It sounds like a nutty idea, even though now in hindsight we realize that using money is actually very productive. Another problem that Menger pointed out was to say, even if some wise king or some smart intellectual sage dreamt up the idea of using money when they had no firsthand experience with it, how would you know what its purchasing power should be? So even if you could get everyone to agree, oh yeah, it would be better if instead of us trading things directly for what we want, we all agree to sell our stuff for these shells, let's say, and then we'll go use the shells to buy whatever it is that we need. So there'll be like a middle step in the transaction. Even if we could all agree that that's a sensible way to proceed, how would you know how much stuff a given shell could buy? What its purchasing power would be? That also would be completely arbitrary. And so that not only would the king have to sell everybody on the idea of using money, he would also have to lay down what the exchange ratios were, like how many shells for a horse, how many shells for a cow, and so forth. Right? So Menger was just walking through and trying to get to see the enormity of the problem, that it's not obvious. How could you go from a state of not using money to a position of using money without assuming some superhuman intellect along the way, and then a lot of force backing it up?
But what gives Bitcoin its
what
value?
Menger then gave, so that seems like, well, gee, okay, you.
What gives Bitcoin its value, Andrew?
Well, it's baked into the use and circulation.
Anything more? No.
I mean,
I'm just gonna.
I think
Time's up. And your answer's wrong. BlackRock.
oh, makes sense.
No, go on.
No, I'm just saying, like, the more it's circulated, the more it's used, the harder the asset, class, because it's in
Asset.
higher demand.
Asset
Look,
liquidity.
this is from 2015. So obviously, the Civil War, it was still, it was.
But we're applying it now.
No, yeah.
And fuck 2015 anyways. Okay. It's 2025 now. And we know where Bitcoin is tracked. So what gives Bitcoin its value now?
Well, the CIA's definitely got a push on it.
Let's
fiat.
Let's not go into Intel. So it's liquidity asset backed in the possession of the dollar and its debasement.
It's
effectively
the foundation for a new stablecoin system.
Sounds fun. So does that fit into the subjectivity of value?
No.
It's like pulling teeth, man. You gonna go elaborate more?
Well, I mean, you have to have a store of value and a medium of exchange, and you can't have one, but that's not the other, and they call it a real currency.
So how do we get Bitcoin to become a real currency?
Bitcoin Core is not going to be a real currency. It's a stablecoin system. It's just trying to reestablish the old order and the new framework.
How do you know? How do you know that we can't turn it back?
We could, technically, but that would be very difficult to do, considering, the software developers are compromised. It's centralized.
Okay. What would you say?
There's a lot of pressure behind the scenes for them not to make significant changes that have gone without, trial and error. Because there's a lot riding on it.
What would you say if I said that if a great catastrophic event economically occurred and many people began to sell off their Bitcoin assets so that they could make a profit in the hole, so they're not in the hole, so they could survive this economic downfall, that would take liquidity out of the market cap and effectively correct Bitcoin to a whole nother standard, which could theoretically occur, actually.
Well, it's about time preference when you talk about stuff like that. So it depends on the quality and the quantity of the Bitcoin that you have. If you're a state government like the United States federal government, they're up against the wall and they're selling their Bitcoin, even though they should be holding on to it because it's stabilizing their grip of power. As for the quantity, the more it runs financially, like grows and hardens and in price, the harder it is for you to force a capitulation of a greater ecosystem and it's actually, like I said, it's baked into the price, and it's a lot harder for you to kind of rig it in your favor. So if you sell, you're really not doing a lot of pressure to adjust the market in your favor, because there's always going to be more people out to buy it.
Yes, yes. But I just mean, what if enough people stupidly sell in this downward trend to the point where more people jump in to actually, I don't know, you begin to reevaluate it, not just hold, but reevaluate it, and maybe even start using it.
Well, it's incredibly difficult sometimes to use the network because of the way that the fee structure has been built. Miners are motivated for a higher fee in order to make money, so they fill the blocks up. But there's so little amount of people using the actual base layer of the chain that there's people more, like I said, they're more interested in building an ecosystem and bringing the old guard in and giving them a place to stay and stabilize their economic systems.
Oh no, Andrew, I think you need to explain that again. You were stuttering.
Thumbs up for Bob. Yeah. I don't know what you want me to explain. I mean,
I want you to squirm.
They're forcing the blockchain to capitulate by mismanaging the way that it was developed. That's what happened during the Civil War.
They're gonna start making their own greenbacks.
That's
absent of the Fed. They're just gonna.
I mean that's what the Lightning Network's supposed to be.
So maybe the Fed was kind of a. It's kind of a good thing right now. It's a barrier.
They're monkey branching from one system to the next.
They're going back to the National Bank Act, aren't they? It's effectively what the Genius Act is, right?
Potentially. It's really all just depends on the kind of social pressure that they think they can stomach in order to, like I said, they're monkey branching. They're going from one system to another and trying to bring as many people on the ride and keep as many people solvent as possible. They've got a lot of friends, a lot of business partners.
Start using Bitcoin Cash and Monero and Xano. Privacy coins and peer-to-peer for non-privacy.
Tari's good. It's just started out, so it's like Monero.
It's in its network.
It uses the same algorithm.
Yeah.
Random X.
Goodbye, Andrew.
You knocked it down, but then what's the solution? He almost makes it look like it's an impossible problem. And what Menger gave, and he didn't invent it out of whole cloth. You can see versions of this even in Adam Smith, but Menger kind of crystallized it and explained it really logically, is he gave a step-by-step account of how people starting in barter could end up using money, even though at no point was that anybody's intention. That nobody consciously said, let's try to move society so that 10 years from now we're all using money. That no one had any goal like that in mind. They were just doing what was in their immediate self-interest, and yet the spontaneous product of those efforts was the creation of what we now call money. All right, so in the interest of time, I'm going to boil it down really quickly for you. Imagine, so I'm going to make an exaggerated scenario, but just to get the idea, the logic of the argument. So Menger's saying, imagine we have a state of barter, there's no money, we just trade things directly against each other, useful commodities. He said, even in that situation, some would be more marketable than others. There would be certain commodities that lots of people would use, like sugar and flour and bread and eggs, where there'd be other commodities that would not have a very big market on any given day. So imagine somebody who makes like telescopes, like really fancy, intricate telescopes. That's his business, okay, and then he wants to go sell that, and he needs to get eggs and milk and all sorts of sweaters and all sorts of things for his household. In a state of barter, he would have to go out and find one other person who had that whole array of goods that he was looking for, that he wanted to go to market to obtain, and that person was looking for the exact kind of telescope that he was bringing to market that day. Okay, so you can see the odds of that happening, of those two sorts of people meeting up, are vanishingly small. And that's what economists call the problem of the double coincidence of wants. That under barter, you need to, if you have something you want to sell and you have something you want to buy, you have to find someone with the reverse valuations, or else the trade won't go through. So Menger said clearly what an obvious solution to that is, or a stepping stone, is the person going to market with the telescope. Even if he can't find someone who has exactly the array of goods that he's looking for, that's his point in going to market that day. Let's say he finds someone who wants the telescope, and that person's willing to give him a good that's far more marketable than the telescope is. Because the telescope, even though it's valuable, it's very illiquid, to use more modern terminology. So Menger would have said it's unsaleable, that it's hard to sell. Okay, it doesn't mean it's got low value, right? There's a distinction there. Just like a house is very valuable, but a house is very illiquid. Okay, whereas a $10 bill is not nearly as valuable as a house, but it's very liquid. Okay, so that's a distinction. Same thing, the telescope could be really valuable, but very illiquid or unmarketable. So an obvious solution is if he finds just somebody who's willing to buy the telescope and give him stuff that's in the proper range of value in terms of market exchange, but yet is more liquid than the telescope, then he'll go ahead and do that. All right, so let's say he finds someone who has a bunch of flour and is willing to give him lots of sacks of flour for the telescope. So he would do that, not because he wants to go home with that many sacks of flour, but because he realizes I can use the flour then and then trade and get the stuff that I ultimately want. Okay, because there's more people out there on any given day who want flour than who want a telescope like this. Okay, so that's the logic of the argument, and then once you get over that little hump, then the rest is obvious, that from the initial state of where some goods were more marketable just because more people wanted to use them directly, that it would be a snowball effect. So now this guy going to market who maybe didn't want flour at all, he would be willing to accept it in trade, knowing, well, I can unload this more easily than that telescope. Okay, so now there's one more person in the community who's willing to accept flour. Okay, so things that had an initial advantage in marketability, it gets multiplied. And so the term for that is a medium of exchange. So a medium of exchange by itself isn't money, it just means something that you're willing to accept, not because you want it directly, but because you plan on trading it away to get something else. Okay, so then where does money come from? Well, Menger just said, well, this process would snowball over time, and things that were initially a little bit more marketable, more people would accept because of that fact, it would multiply, and then eventually, if you got to a point where there were one or a few commodities that everybody in the community would accept as a medium of exchange, that's what money is. Okay, and then so being money is just an empirical, it's a question of degree, whereas a medium of exchange, that's like a qualitative difference. Okay, if you accept something not because you want to use it yourself, but because you plan on trading away, that's what makes it a medium of exchange. But if it's money, it just means, is this thing a medium of exchange for enough people in the relevantly defined community that it's universally acceptable? Then that's what makes it money. So all money is a medium of exchange, but not all media of exchange are money. Okay, then to explain why historically were some things monies and others not, there were a few principles that would make for a good money. So if something
Damn, I was hoping you would have something to say, so I went off. What do you think, Andrew?
I mean, it makes sense to me.
You don't have anything to say?
Well, like I said before, they've mismanaged the way that Bitcoin's ecosystem was developed after the Civil War. I mean, they tried to come to a compromise and segregated witness, and it just fell apart. So they had to do a fork. And now we've got, the deep state or whatever you want to call it coming in, trying to, build out their framework of,
Mistake.
oh, we can compromise the situation and bring as many people on board and normalize what Bitcoin is through a new lens of what a new phase of banking, or we can try that, but everybody else goes and liquidates their Bitcoin privately and puts it on a different network and forces their hand. I mean,
The commodity.
Yeah.
They might as well just put it on the Standard and Poor's. I think it is actually.
That's where Xano comes in. So
yeah, the private tokenized private assets.
it's definitely
Was
it's definitely
durable,
the right direction.
Easily divisible, homogeneous in terms of smaller divisible parts. Things like that would, a convenient market exchange value for its weight, things like that would make for a good money. And so that's why like cattle aren't very good actually, because they're hard to maintain, they're hard to move around, they go to the bathroom, that sort of thing, right? So even though cattle in certain places was money, that's not why in 1850 the merchants around the world were using cattle as money, because that's inefficient. The reason gold and silver were the monies par excellence is because they were good on all of those dimensions. So let me just quickly walk through. So you might wonder, well, how come diamonds didn't become money, even though in many respects diamonds are kind of like gold? Well, because it's not that a pound of diamonds is the same as a pound of diamonds, right? If you have one huge diamond that's a pound, that's more valuable than a bunch of tiny little diamonds that collectively weigh a pound. Whereas with gold, that's not true. If you have a pound of gold and a pound of gold, unless it happens to be like in a antique coin or something, you could just melt it down and then you do whatever you want with it. So a pound of gold or silver is a pound of gold or silver, again, except for numismatic value. Whereas that's not true for diamonds or emeralds and things like that. You might say, okay, well, how come bronze or platinum didn't become money? How come gold and silver? Well, just because the vagaries of exchange and convenience, gold and silver were good. That for big purchases, gold coins were convenient, and for smaller purchases, silver coins were convenient in terms of how much weight of metal in your pocket. Whereas bronze, you would have needed to be carrying around too much weight for the transactions you wanted to do. And for metals that were rarer than gold, it was the opposite problem, that it was too small, that you'd have to dilute it too much for a given coin. Otherwise, you'd only use it very rarely. Okay, so that's Menger's story for how money would have emerged spontaneously from a state of barter. Okay, and so notice in that explanation, nobody ever sat around saying we really have to work hard to create money because that will help everybody. It just spontaneously happens. So you can see why libertarians like that kind of a story, right? That it didn't take any central planner, it just spontaneously happened, everyone working in his own interest, and also why objectivists would like that kind of story. Okay, the other contribution that Menger gave was what's called marginal subjective value theory, and that overturned the classical economist approach that relied on the cost theory. Now, we're running low on time here, and so I want to get to the meat of this and the Bitcoin issue. So really quickly, the classical economists tended to explain relative prices in the market by the cost of production. And so, just loosely speaking, if you said, how come a bottle of champagne has such a high price, they would say, well, the land on which the grapes are grown and so forth is really expensive, and so it costs a lot to make that thing, so they have to be able to charge enough to cover their costs. With Menger's approach, it flipped it on its head and said, no, the reason a bottle of champagne has a high market value is people like to drink it. It gives them utility, and one more bottle of champagne gives them a lot of happiness, and that's why it has a high market price. And because of that, the people who grow the grapes that are needed to make that stuff are willing to pay a lot for that particular land. And so they can bid away that land from potential other uses. And so it's the other way around, that it's the high price of the champagne that makes the cost of production end up being higher. All right, but ultimately it's subjective consumer valuations of the object that is the source of its value in the marketplace. So it's not anything objective, it's not a feature out there, it's in the human mind. All right, so that's subjective value theory, and that is the modern explanation of market prices. So that's not just an Austrian thing, it's just Menger happened to be one of the pioneers in that, who's also happened to be an Austrian economist. Okay, but ironically perhaps, even though that swept the field, economists use that approach to explain relative prices, like why a horse would trade for so many barrels of marmalade or something like that in terms of relative values. But to explain the purchasing power of money, they didn't use subjective value theory because they thought they would be arguing in a circle. So let me just try to get you to see this, and then you'll understand what Mises solved. And then we'll be finally where we need to be so you understand where Bitcoin comes in. All right? So I get my students to pay attention because I know I'm going to quiz them, but you guys just bear with me here. All right. Okay, so the problem, so like I said, economists across the board embraced what was called subjective value theory. They realized the old classical approach of a cost theory of value was wrong. There was lots of problems with that. The subjective value theory could explain everything. It was great. But they thought the one area where it didn't really make sense or it seemed kind of superfluous was explaining the purchasing power of money. So let me just boil it down for you. If I say, why is it that this teenager is willing to sell an hour of his labor for a $10 bill, the subjective value theory would say, oh, because he subjectively values getting that $10 bill more than his hour of leisure. And you say, okay, but why does he value that $10 bill? It's just a green piece of paper. You know, he can't eat it. It's not very useful for much. You say, oh, well, because he can go buy stuff with it. That's why he values it. So it looks like you're just arguing in a circle. It looks like you're saying the reason a $10 bill can buy things like an hour of labor.
I will pay you 5 bottle caps for you to go over to Rumble, everybody, and give the legacy right a follow. 5 bottle caps.
God knows I'm on my way.
You can become a very rich man in the wasteland. At one time, I had 100,000 bottle caps. Did not know what the hell to do with them.
Subscribed.
Would you like 5 bottle caps? Go over to Rumble.
They're shipping to me in the mail.
Is that a $10 bill can buy things. And so, you know, I could just as well, that explanation could just as well explain why he would sell his labor for a $1,000 bill if the stuff he wanted to buy, you know, in the market was roughly comparable to his hour of labor, right? So the subjective value theory seemed like it explained relative prices, like why an hour of labor would trade for so many cans of Coke, but it didn't seem like it would explain the actual absolute value of dollars, let's say, all right? So Mises was the one who explained that element of the problem. And he said, no, you got to bring the time element into it, that really what's going on when you sell an hour of labor or anything in general right now for money, it's because you have an expectation of the future purchasing power of money, right? You're accepting money now because you think when you spend it down the road, it will be able to buy some stuff. So you're explaining the current purchasing power of money by reference to expectations of its future ones. So there's a little bit of a time element involved. And so then the economist said, well, wait a minute, Mises, though, okay, you're right, it's not a circular argument, but now it's just an infinite regress. You're basically saying the reason money has purchasing power today is that people yesterday thought it was going to have purchasing power, or they had some expectations of what it was going to be yesterday. All right, and so it's, you know, where do we get our expectations of what the $10 bill is going to buy? The teenager, it's because he has recently been to the store and saw it with his own eyes what a $10 bill buys. Okay, so Mises kind of split it up and said, loosely speaking, yesterday the teenager saw what a $10 bill could buy, so today he sells an hour of labor for a $10 bill because he expects tomorrow he has a good idea of what a $10 bill can buy. So it's like tomorrow's purchasing power ultimately gets explained by yesterday's purchasing power. So the economist said, well, Mises, you're just arguing an infinite regress. How do you explain yesterday's purchasing power? Well, you'd have to go to the day before. And then they threw their hands up. And then Mises said, no, it wouldn't go back infinitely. So it's true, my story says ultimately today's purchasing power is based on yesterday's is ultimately based on the day before, and so on, but it's not infinite. There's a definite stopping point when we get back to the original state of barter, because Menger has already shown us how you go from barter to the emergence of money. And so Mises is saying what I'm telling you is right now, using subjective value theory, I can explain the purchasing power of money by reference to our knowledge of yesterday's prices, and we could go back step by step ultimately to barter, because Menger's shown us how to get out of that trap. And once we're in barter, we don't have this issue of a circular argument. It's we already know, we all agree as economists how to explain barter prices, because that's just relative prices. Okay, so that is that's the way I would have taught this stuff to my students back when I was a college professor. That's the way, writing up study guides for Austrian economics, that's what I would give, all right? So now, I hope you guys can see at least the issue of where Bitcoin comes in. It looks like that shouldn't be possible, and you'll see many people literally say, well, no, Mises showed that in order for something to be a money, it must have first served as a commodity. Oh, by the way, in case you're concerned, one of the, you say, well, what about the fiat money, government fiat money, like dollars and euros and stuff? Was never used as a commodity. So how did Mises explain that? Well, he would say that was historically, those were redeemable in gold and silver. So it's not that some group of people just started using unbacked US dollars. It's historically was tied to gold, and that link was severed. So that's how people had the connection. So it's not a moralistic or a fairness argument. It's an argument about people need to know what the purchasing power is in order to get off the ground. That's kind of where the argument is. So a lot of people say, well, Bitcoin can never become money because of this issue. So we're getting close here where we want to switch to Q&A. So let me just offer some of the things I've said in this debate on this topic, and then I'll turn it over to you guys, and maybe Q&A will get further along. So one thing I pointed out to people is I said, you got to be really careful. You're going to end up making Mises look like an idiot, because if you say, like I said, I'm not putting words in people's mouth. People literally will say, and I'm sure many of you have seen this on the internet, that Bitcoin can never become money. Yeah, sure, right now a small group of people use it, but it will never be a widely accepted money because of the Mises regression theorem. And I was pointing out, that's not a good argument. You're misunderstanding it. If Mises is right and has something relevant to say against Bitcoin, it can't be a medium of exchange. Because whether something's a medium of exchange turn it into money, that's just an empirical, quantitative matter of how many people are using it. The decisive thing is someone willing to accept it to then go buy something else with it. And in Mises' actual words, in the Theory of Money and Credit, the book where he developed this, he says stuff like, it is unthinkable that something could serve as a medium of exchange without having previously been in use as a regular commodity that was not valued for those reasons. Okay, so it's Mises himself who puts the crux of the matter on whether it can be a medium of exchange. Whether it's a money is just a detail after that point. So I'm pointing out to people, Bitcoin, and I was actually at a conference one time, and a guy who was of this mindset said something like, he made a real sweeping statement like, well, no, right now people just use Bitcoin to get other currencies. No one actually buys real goods and services with Bitcoin. And some 18-year-old in the crowd said, well, I do. And he was good about it. He was cool about it. He just went, oh. And then we just moved on. Like it's the economist admits he was wrong, page 1. But so that was good. But so that's part of it. So that's the lie. So I was trying to walk people through and say, just be really careful if you want to hold up Mises as this guru on this matter, that the way you guys are framing it, he already is demonstrably wrong. So I think you want to recalibrate the argument. So it wouldn't be an issue of could it ever evolve into money. So clearly we see that Bitcoin is already out there serving as a medium of exchange. And again, in case you're losing the terminology, just meaning people will sell valuable stuff like bicycles and software and t-shirts in exchange for Bitcoin, knowing full well that they're going to use that Bitcoin to acquire other things later. Okay, and so it already is serving as a medium of exchange, so there's clearly no issue about it. It can't be impossible. If you're thinking Mises proved it was impossible, then Mises was wrong because it already happened. So then the other issue for when I've done and trying to talk with people, people coming from this mindset, is to try to understand.
Yeah. Very sad.
Sorry, I just want to make it easy for people to read that.
That is very, very sad.
Just-
Anything on what Bob is saying, though, Andrew?
Just real quick, I wanted to make the connection. He's talking about how
Is it
they
that,
make
Mises?
I'm just
how
setting up. Go on.
they sever the connection between gold and fiat money, right? That's the same thing that they did with the Lightning Network. That's just severing between the base chain and implementing their own version of a new pivot fiat currency.
With stable coins.
Yeah, I mean,
That
does Walmart need a stable coin?
maybe. For all the subsidies that they take in for EBT, probably. That's pretty much the reason.
I'm just saying.
Stabilize.
There's
Stabilize
obviously something going on here.
Well, that's the thing. Like, with the way I look at it, like, does Walmart need a stable coin? No, but yes, in the destabilizing economy, fake economy that we live in today, with enormous subsidy, credit expansion, EBT use, this is how Walmart makes all of its money. It gets subsidized by the government from all the EBT drive that it takes in, because there's a lot of people on welfare, a lot of people on food stamps. And so would the stable coin effectively help as you're pivoting, shifting to a new lens of a fiat economy, utilizing a digital apparatus? Yes, it would actually substantially help companies like Walmart or Kroger, especially within the apparatus of subsidy-driven economics.
Could it be said that basically our economy's having a cardiac event and they're trying to stabilize? I guess I could draw a comparison between that.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, because they're trying to stabilize as best as they can for a critical condition such as a cardiac event, for which they are attempting to revive this country and its failed economy, so that they can go in and rush them into plastic surgery. You have a cardiac event prior to plastic surgery. I guess that's the comparison that I'm going to use. They were initially going into plastic surgery, but they had a cardiac event, so they have to stabilize it before you try to reimagine everything under another system, which is a digital apparatus, CBDCs, backed by stable coins. That's the step closer to your CBDC. And the reason why Walmart is getting into the stablecoin market is it's one step drive towards UBI.
William says he remembers this conference at the Austin Speedway. It was just up the road from him. That's pretty cool.
That is awesome.
Like I said, it was in
Did you
Texas,
go?
so that's surprising.
Did you go? Since it was up the road, William.
Right? Let us know.
What?
Did he just overlook something, or is there some way we can reconcile it? So if you want to try to reconcile it, you could do it like this, and I've seen some people try to say it, people who are fans of Bitcoin and fans of living on Mises and his regression theorem, and they say, well, no, it was serving as a useful commodity valued beyond its just ability to serve as a medium of exchange, because the early adopters knew that if this thing takes off, it will challenge the state's hegemony or something like that, and so they were valuing it. There's a little kick in there, so that was partly why they were accepting it, because they saw the future, and so they weren't just valuing it as a medium of exchange, right? So that's one way to try to work it in. Just like gold and silver were valued as jewelry before people started accepting them as a medium of exchange. By the same token, they're saying people would have just intrinsically valued Bitcoin for ideological reasons. Okay, so that's one sort of escape hatch. My leaning, and this is the last point I'll make here and turn over to your guys' questions, I think we should just admit that Mises didn't conceive of this possibility. Because in practice, again, not to throw him under the bus, and you can see where he's coming from, it is odd. Remember the problem with the shells and Menger's critique of the idea that some king just woke up one day and invented money out of thin air. Again, one of the arguments against that was to say, well, how would anybody know how much purchasing power it should have? That's kind of weird. But actually what happened historically with Bitcoin is in the beginning it had virtually zero purchasing power, but it wasn't exactly zero. And so I don't think anyone ever conceived of that you might get people to adopt something not having any experience with what its purchasing power was if it was so cheap that in the grand scheme of things, yeah, sure, I'll take that, and I'll take 1,000 of these for a pizza, whatever, because it's not a big deal to give up one pizza for this stuff. And then if that was just the genesis to then give us some framework for how do we know what its purchasing power, then it's off to the races. So in my mind, you could bend over backwards and try to say, well, no, that fits into what Mises, but I think it's just easier to say he didn't conceive of that possibility, that it could start out with a really low purchasing power that then mushroomed over time. Actually, I lied. One more thing I want to say, again, in terms of you guys understanding the hesitance or the resistance. Again, part of the appeal of the Mengerian story was nobody had to invent money. It wasn't that they sat around scratching their heads and agonizing over it. There weren't conferences to get people to start using gold as money. It just happened spontaneously. And so a lot of Austro-libertarians think it's weird when they read stuff like, after the Mount Gox goes down, and I saw some people writing real heartfelt reactions and saying things like, okay guys, this isn't the end, we just got to regroup and let's not give up, this is this thing will work, we just got to think it through. And so a lot of libertarians look at there and say, it shouldn't be this hard, you shouldn't have to plan this, and it just strikes them as icky, like, oh, we're central planners. Okay, so I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I just want you to understand the emotional, why that seems odd to them. And so for a lot of people, they don't understand this. Okay, so I'll stop there and turn over to questions.
Thank you very much. And also, you did bring up a great point about using it as a commodity.
I brought up several great points.
True. Well, I was going to address that one specifically, and processing power and bandwidth have been used to serve up web pages for a long time, so they were used as a commodity.
Okay, good. Yeah, and that's, I should say, a part of it is just simple ignorance. Like I said, the one guy saying people just traded against other currencies, which obviously wasn't true. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Jim Rapp. I want to know, I think a lot of the Austrias have been so invested in gold and silver and metals and things like that, I think they're having a hard time grasping the digital concept, so maybe that's part of it. Also, I think some I see don't believe that there's enough awareness of the regulatory and governmental role that the state has and how it will impact the cryptocurrencies as it is done with gold and silver to some degree. And also, one more, flexibility of currency, which we have now with the fiat currency, and not this one.
Yeah, so it is true, and that kind of goes to my first point, that if people have been pushing gold as the free market money, bar none, they kind of don't, that's what their position has been. It says it would be awkward for them to say, oh wow, this new Bitcoin thing is actually better than gold even. And that's one issue that I brought up with, the reason a lot of hard money types like gold so much is that it's difficult to mine, right? The governments can't just run the printing press with gold. But even in principle, like an asteroid or something full of gold could crash here, or there could be advances in alchemy and they'd be able to turn lead into gold. The Star Trek, you make a cup of coffee and just give me a bar of gold. That was my impression of the Star Trek replicator. So in principle, if that happened and you had a gold-based economy, there would be massive inflation. Okay, and so that's one of the virtues I pointed out with something like Bitcoin, is that mathematically you can inflate it, or something like Bitcoin. And so that's one way I was trying to appeal to that mentality.
Hi, I'm Cyril Hori, and you said that money has to be a commodity that is useful to something, right? And I was wondering, what is gold useful for other than being money?
Okay, yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. So well, right now, I mean, gold is used as jewelry. It's dental fillings. It's things like that. I mean, look at.
I'm sorry, man. That was a dumbass question.
I mean, they use
What kind of
on
what
motherboards all the time.
what I'm gonna let you answer it, Andrew. What does gold have value for other than money?
Oh man. Well, it's obviously a good form of insurance. You know, you're supposed to hold it in between currencies, and then liquidate into the new currency and improve
Oh,
your
that's a good
position.
hedge.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and then you could use it, like I said, on motherboards and all kinds of different stuff. Telephones.
Mm-hmm. You can also use
Hold
it for
back.
your golden dildo.
Man, I never thought of that. But
Should we?
I
This is
did
the
think of.
Q. This is the
I did
Q and
think
A.
of.
Should we watch the Q and A or?
Yeah, let's give it a little while longer, but real quick, yeah, I was about to throw that out there. I did think of this. William responded, I wasn't there,
Mm-hmm.
but later watched Vitalik explain Ethereum and didn't understand it, so I didn't invest in it very early. Oops. Well, it's okay. I was mining it when it first came out, and I just fumbled it in 2017. So I think I had 30, and that would have been fun if I was more financially responsible at the time. But you live and learn. Sorry.
Thank you,
You very
sir.
much.
So, and peace. So with that Bitcoin, Ethereum, they all have intrinsic value in some capacity.
Right.
So long as you match up to what you perceive it's going to have value with. So if it has a liquid fine detail in the activity of your market systems of society, community, whatever, how you're going to drive your society, then it can have value or it could not have value.
The
It
price is
all
baked in. It's all about how patient you're willing to be.
Nobody's patient in today's day and age. I think a lot of that has a lot to do with social media and just the rapid response of how technology has been in today's day and age. All the information that just gets bombarded into our minds, into the perception of our minds through our eyes, our ears, what we listen to, what we watch, what we read. It's all happening so fast that people have a little bit of attention deficit disorder anymore. Actually, I would probably go even for attention deficit hyperactive disorder, um, to the point that nobody's really very patient. That's why you have more people just scrolling through a bunch of reels or TikToks or whatever, rather than simple long form videos or reading a book. More people have to be able to listen to a book anymore, Andrew, rather than be able to open it up and be a civil human being and read.
Or, go through the effort and the time to listen to a Q&A from Bob Murphy.
You just want to listen to the Q&A.
Patience. I do.
Well, he pretty much already summed it all up. You know what? Fuck
Well,
it. Put up the Q&A.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty interesting. Sorry. We're fighting for
You-
control of managing the comments.
I'm gonna take
Here we-
control here.
Okay.
I'll take control. There you go, Andrew. Oh, I gotta bring it up. Okay.
Mr. T wears a lot of gold. Right.
Electronics.
Right. No, but I mean, it was.
Jewelry, I mean, the reason why people like to have jewelry in the first place is because at the end of the day, you know, when they go broke, they can melt that and have something left. That's why I think people are wearing gold. I don't know.
Well, yes, there certainly is an element there that, you know, if you wore fake jewelry that's not actually valuable, that people know. So yeah, there's a status thing to show, look at how expensive this is. But, you know, you wear diamond rings too, but diamonds aren't never served as money. So there is a distinction. But there's another point too, that strictly speaking, even if no one used gold for industrial purposes or jewelry or anything anymore, as long as it had that historical link. Because again, the issue is, how did anyone ever know along the way what its purchasing power was? That's the issue with the regression theorem. So as long as just at some point in the past, people did use gold for some reason, it's just a regular commodity, that's all the Misesian story needs.
But that fuck to be useful for something now. I mean, like, so we could say that Bitcoin in the past was useful, for example, on Silk Road, and now it becomes like a money that is used for something else, and it became money that way. I mean, it's I don't know.
Right.
Listen. If you get into Monero, there is a marketplace. You can buy houses on this place, actually. XMR Bazaar. It's a marketplace with Monero.
Good luck trying
Doesn't
to
have
explain to tax regulators how you bought that house.
Fuck them.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Fuck them. What do we say here, Andrew? Taxation is what?
Extortion.
No, it's gay.
Well, it is gay too. And theft.
We're meaner than this. Yeah, we're meaner than that. Taxation is gay. Don't pay your taxes. I'm literally this is not legal advice, but it's kind of legal advice. Listen to me. Stop paying taxes. If we all just stop paying taxes, their house of cards would crumble.
Actually, it's
But
kind of
you
already
don't-
is. We forced them to let the air out of the bubble.
Well, yeah.
That's why they're pivoting.
Exactly. But that's what I mean. Like, there's marketplaces that can be set up utilizing alternative currencies, and it doesn't have to necessarily be Silk Road, marketplace similar to Silk Road, where it's just an influx of explicit products, because it was, I mean, there was some regular stuff on there, but mostly it was explicit. It was mostly drugs and guns and all that. Doesn't have to always be just that. But I think what XMR Bazaar is doing is it's showing that you can actually use an alternative like Monero or the like to buy products in real time in a real market for necessities that aren't just drugs and guns.
You see, officer, when I bought the house with Monero, I decided, fuck the system.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Now, excuse me, I'm going to jail. Have a good day.
Yeah. Watching this going down memory lane for me, the old arguments they used to use back then were prominent. History rhymes.
Right.
It really does. Proof libertarian principles were the norm back then. This guy would never be asked to speak at a current Bitcoin conference. I forget, has he been at another Bitcoin conference in the last few years?
Well, I know he was at the Property and Freedom Society talk about Bitcoin a while back.
Yeah, but that was like,
That's more specialized.
yeah, specialized. That was also like 4 or 5 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, I just
Hmm.
remember seeing him. They were talking about mining and stuff like that, and I was trying to find the video from mining, and I saw this. And I'm like, well, this is about the right length for Crypto Wednesday, so we'll give this a shot.
The right length. All right, let's finish up.
But I think the general narrative is that Bitcoin was invented because people realized, oh wow, if this thing takes off, this would be a wonderful money. This would be a better money than what we're using. So that's the, again, I'm not taking sides, but that's the issue. That's the claim.
And gold was and is extensively used in electronics and aerospace to this day for its functional uses as well. Yeah. Forms for bonds.
So just briefly, I'd like to kind of respond to the emotional thing about it looking like central planning, and that is that libertarians do have conferences and strategy sessions and things about trying to establish gold and silver.
But we don't
as a
accomplish
currency.
anything. It seems like you guys think you're actually going to do something, so that's kind of pisses people
So
off.
I have, I do have an actual question, and this is because I'm not accustomed to making a distinction between mediums of exchange and money. And so I would say that I absolutely already accept Bitcoin as a medium of exchange. But what you described as the distinction was when everyone in the market adopts it, then it becomes money. And I don't think that's true of dollars now, because I offer a lot of things that I don't accept dollars for, and there are other countries that don't accept dollars as a medium of exchange. So where's the tipping point? Is there anywhere in this theory that says where the tipping point is definitionally between a medium of exchange and a money?
Right, it's a good question. No, and he is upfront about that. He says it's just a judgment call. So clearly, most people in the geographical region of the United States, if you said, do people accept dollars, I think most people say yes. Whereas if you go to, I went to Chile recently, and I went to a certain area, and I was trying to buy stuff with dollars, and they were just shaking their heads at me, right? So you could talk about, the dollar is the money in this area. And so if you say, well, what do you mean by that? You mean, well, most people in this area accept dollars. You're right.
So I could
Somebody
say
might not.
Bitcoin is a money in this area.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess
Exactly.
I kind of would like someone to be on the record from the Austrian school what that tipping point is in their mind, and what percentage of people in the global market accept Bitcoin, and when they would just admit that it's a money, even if it confronts
It'll
their
always be
theories.
1 percentage point more than what it is right now.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you.
Hey, sir, you describe economists having trouble defining value now based on the past. It didn't have past value, but in finance, isn't all value based on future value anyway? Are these economists having trouble with finance?
Okay. No, a good point. I mean, it was liable to confusion. I think I might have misspoken actually when I was going over it, but let me clarify. So the idea is you accept money today, or you sell stuff for money today because you have an expectation of its future purchasing power. But then Ms. Mises was saying, how do you get that? It's because of your recollection of what it was purchasing in the past. Right? So one way to think of it, like let's say you were in a coma and woke up in 50 years, and someone came up to you and said, hey, I like that watch on your arm, I'll give you $300 for it. You probably would say, well, once you were like, oh my gosh, I was in a coma, after you recover from that, you would say, wait, I can't because I need to go see what does a dollar buy anymore because I've been asleep for 50 years. So that's the idea that in order for you to sell stuff for money, you need to kind of know what it is. So it's not that they're using the past to form present expectations, it's that they're using the past to form expectations. So it ultimately is future-oriented thinking, but where do you come up with that?
So with information and liquidity, this shouldn't be a problem, right? If someone's informed and it's liquid, they can establish a future value.
Yeah, so and this is one thing I've said too, that guys, it's almost like they're proving that space flight is impossible. And I was saying, Bitcoin has a purchasing power right now, so clearly there's a basis for us to observe and then see what should I accept it for. So it's like they're trying to explain that no one must have ever accepted it back originally. And I said, well, they did. And so it's,
All right,
there you go.
Hi, Professor Murphy. Gus Demos, also Austrian, former libertarian, current anarcho-capitalist. I personally think Mises is the best economist of all time, too. I think Theory of Money and Credit, 1912, is the most important book from an economic standpoint ever.
Agreed.
My question is, why can't current Austrians say maybe there's just a few things that he missed? Like, he couldn't have foreseen the digital age, he couldn't have seen crypto, he couldn't have seen the power of anonymity. I never have heard a string theory physicist or quantum mechanics physicist call Isaac Newton a dumbass. Like, we don't, there's just certain things that Mises might have missed and couldn't foreseen, and I don't think it's that big of a deal if everything moving forward doesn't fit in this perfect hole, and oh my God, it doesn't fit with Bombaric or Rothbard or Mises. Exactly right. It's not a big deal.
Can we get security to get this guy out of here?
Physical removal,
No,
so to speak.
With everything. There's just things we
Right.
can't foresee.
Right, yeah. So like I said, that's why my inclination is just to say the way to deal with it is he wasn't anticipating that, in particular, the possibility of being real low purchasing power and rising quickly. There are ways you could do somersaults to try to... So it's, you know, people revere a thinker, and especially since he wasn't appreciated by the mainstream, it makes you more want to, you know, cherish him and hold him up against criticism. So that's what's
I
going
guess
on.
I haven't removed the tattoo from my ass. It's still there. I love the guy. I love Mises.
Well, now he needs to be physically removed.
No, there's cameras.
Dr. Murthy, Albert Wu here.
Keep the trousers
I think
on.
that the critics, the Austrian critics, they fail to recognize that the consumption can occur in this sort of psychic domain, meaning not clairvoyance, but psychic as in, you know, psychic revenue.
Yep.
So Mises, he didn't maybe talk about this, but there is room for Bitcoin in the theory. And so your escape hatch, and the non-PhD way of explaining that is like Bitcoiners like to stick it to the man, right? They did before and they do now.
Right.
So that's the direct
And with
use.
Janet Yellen, I want to stick it to the woman, too.
Okay.
Just, let's not be sexist.
But that's the direct use. It was the direct use before, and you'll see
Right.
that in play even now. If you go to a bar tonight, you're going to see someone from this room trying to buy a beer with Bitcoin, even though the bartender doesn't want to do it. They'll wait patiently for the tablet to come out. They'll even show the vendor how to accept Bitcoin. That's not a simple medium of exchange, right? There's some psychic revenue there. So what I'm wondering is, why aren't you and some other Austrians willing to just come out and say, there is a direct use, this is the direct use, Mises is okay because this conforms to everything he said, and Bitcoin is legitimate QED.
Yeah, that's...
Would you like to answer that, Mr. Psychologist?
Well, it's because when you put yourself in a position and making, you know, staking a claim like that, you can't anticipate all the outcomes in the future. And you had to double back and, you know, you'll have to defend, and you're spending more time defending your position instead of actually doing something and working on improving something else.
Well, let's see if this is the battle of the bald heads right now. So let's see what Bob's answer is. Maybe you won, Andrew. I think you won.
That is one way of doing it.
But I noticed you, like you're hedging, like you're...
This is
you're
my personality. Yeah.
Bob won. Never mind. One right there with that one-liner zinger.
Yeah, one thing you probably might have touched on was the utility of Bitcoin. You know, being able to exchange it internationally with little fees or, you know, credit card fees, much lower than that. There's a lot of value in that, right? So that's one big, one selling point that I guess you might have touched on, but that gives it a lot of value. Have you, is any comments on that?
Right. But I think a lot of that stuff is, you know, if this could get off the ground, we can all see how much of a better monetary framework this would be than what we're doing. And the issue is, but can it get off the ground? Like, if you were the only person that used Bitcoin, all those cool features would be irrelevant. I think that's the idea. And so then this apparent stumbling block was, how could you ever get someone to accept it because they wouldn't know what it was worth? You know, should they sell you a house for 1 Bitcoin? They have no idea.
So now that that hurdle's getting crossed, maybe that becomes more important, that it has more utility.
Right, but like I said, we know that they did get over the hurdle, so it's kind of silly that we're arguing about, you know, it's just a question of how did they do it, but yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it's kind of like, you know, we didn't have the power of networks back then, right? Like the first telephone. Well, why would I want a telephone? Who am I going to call?
Right.
First fax machine, first email. you know? And it's the power of the network by each single node exponentially adding to the power of the entire network. That's where the real value is.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I guess the way to fit that into the, the theoretical framework is to say maybe the first people were investing in it. It's like they were looking at it and thought, this, if it takes off, this thing will have a lot of it, either for ideological reasons or just financial ones. They were speculating and partly accepted it for that. Just like the first people, using a phone, they realized, well, this will revolutionize things.
Any more questions, anyone? Anyone? Well, let's give a round of applause to our favorite economist.
Thumbs up to Bob, everybody. Like, subscribe, thumbs up for Bob. 2 thumbs up for Bob. So, anyway, so anything more to cover right there, Andrew?
Well, I'm just talking about why would I use a phone? Why would I use an email? Back in the 80s, you could go to a payphone and hook the payphone up to a computer and check your email, but it just wasn't practical. It looked really weird. There's memes about it online, but it's all about mass market adoption.
They had laptops back in the 80s.
No, it was like a regular payphone, right? You would just put it on. It wasn't in the same line. Let me see if I can find the meme. Hold on.
No, I know what you're talking about. I mean, it's not like they were taking a big ass computer to the payphone. They had laptops back then, but you would lay the payphone on the computer, and it costs like, I don't know, like 15 cents for a fax.
Here we go.
If a call is a dime.
Just a second. Trying to find a big picture.
I know they had laptops.
It wasn't a laptop though, per se.
Well, you can't take your big ass computer. That isn't practical. Why would you take your big ass computer to a payphone to send a fax?
Just a second.
Who cares?
It's just interesting to see.
Because you're a boomer?
I mean, check that out.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd lay the phone out. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's bizarre. It really isn't practical. I like that pipe right there.
It is a very nice
Good
pipe.
Man. Good man. That is a very, very nice pipe, actually.
Can we get you his number?
You're gay. I'm about once we get off here, I think I'm gonna go pack a bowl and go smoke a pipe, dude.
Well, I figured he was on the phone. He'd give you his number, so you could ask him where to get that pipe.
Maybe you should just give him a call up, man.
867-5309.
90210.
Yeah, right.
877 cash now. I need a structured settlement. 877 cash now.
Hey, the gimmick worked. Everyone remembers the number.
You want to sing it? Sing it in the opera style?
If you need long-term payments, but you need cash now, call J.G. Whitworth. 877 cash now.
That was terrible.
I know.
That was terrible. Get the phone. Get the phone. Get the door.
Okay, just a second. I'll be right back.
Thank you, William.
Hello? Hello?
Oh no.
Hey.
They're about to do cocaine.
Guess what?
Oh.
Bitcoin came. Bitcoin came.
Bitcoin, baby.
Hey, yeah, this is Bitcoin. I'm back. The king of the rap shit. I'm back in this Bitcoin, baby. I'm back in this bitch. Flossing fast cars and rolling with my clique. The king of the rap shit, the real OG. Whack ass rappers got nothing on me. Bought another Lambo, 3 hoes inside it, 10 hoes in line, ready to ride it. It's Bitcoin, bitch. Keep the track bumping. Really on the plug. I got pies in the oven. 80 years old And your baby mama fond of me. All she wanna do is smoke my broccoli. Private jets from Rome to Ibiza. Lisa, Jenny, Julie, and Maria. Every day I gotta give thanks. I got bitcoins in the bank. Bitcoin, baby. I'm back in this bitch.
Bitcoin, baby.
Oh. I'm a bad motherfucker.
Bitcoin, baby.
The king of the rap shit. I'm back in this bitch. Axe your grandmother. Verse 2, coming with the gin and the juice. Call me a drag, spit flame in the boot. I'm hot, like a thermos full of coffee. So hot, can't get the hose off me. It's true, I got the weed card and shit. I'm smoking like a motherfucking chimney, kid. Bitches love me, my shit's never whack. Tell these motherfuckers, Bitcoin's back.
Bitcoin, baby.
I'm a bad motherfucker.
Hot like hot coffee. Oh.
Axe your grandmother.
Surprise, motherfucker.
The king of the rap shit. I'm back in this bitch.
Get your hands in the air. Put your hands on the car. Put your 2 hands on the rock. Put your 2 hands on the rock.
Bitcoin, baby.